All right, welcome back to the channel. We are going to dive back into this Jen Wilkin thing. People have been reaching out at a higher rate than normally, just enjoying the series. You know, Jen has a lot of influence on a lot of different people. And so people are appreciating just sort of the straightforward talk about what she's up to in the church. And so we're just going to jump right into it. If you find it helpful, then I find it fun. That's how our relationship works. So let's just jump right into it. Before I do, though, I actually rewinded just a little bit because a lot of people pointed this particular section out, and there was something I could have said about this section that I chose not to. But I'm gonna revisit it because a lot of people pointed this out as just a strange quirk almost, and I wanted to just review it. So you might remember this. This is where she starts to talk about how, you know, we really need to, in the church, be an example of platonic friends, because that's what the world is desperately needing. You know, we need to have male-female platonic friendships. The world is really missing that, and the church needs to be an example for that. Let me save my commentary till you hear it.
Neighbor as you love yourself. But what we have done is said, who then is my neighbor? And men in the church in particular have said, well, my neighbor is my male fellow believer. It's not my female fellow believer, because and this is all linked to the fact that we exist in a hypersexualized culture. I think everybody would acknowledge that. And the problem with that is that the culture around us is telling us that you can't have friendship. You can't have brother sisterhood, that any relationship, and I would say this doesn't mean just male, female, any relationship, and if someone you feel a strong emotion for who is not your spouse, it has to be sexual or romantic. There's no such thing as just a pure friendship or a deep, true, and abiding friendship between men and men, women and women, men and women. Watch any movie that's coming out of the theaters, and there's almost no friendship that endures for the full length of the movie. At some point, any deep relationship turns romantic or sexual. And so that means that for the church in a post-Christian culture, where else should we expect the culture to turn to know what true friendship and brother sisterhood is going to look like, if not us? And yet
This is I'm going to stop there. A lot of people commented on this, that this kind of seems out of place with what she was talking about. And they found it interesting that she's on this, you know, why can't we be friends thing, just like the feminist Amy Bird was doing as well, the egalitarian Amy Bird. And it's just like, well, why is this so important to them? And I agree. It's very interesting that we're doing this. But just think about what she said for a second about the movies, right? She said in any movie, any deep emotional relationship, there's no friendships anymore. Now everything has to be hypersexualized, you know? And so we need to be an example. We need to have male-female, brother-sister relationships, deep emotional relationships to show the world what could be, the way it should be. And I got to be honest with you, there is every single word of that is not true. It's like that Luke Skywalker thing when he's talking to Kylo Ren. It's unbelievable. Every single word you said is wrong. I just, the last two, like, entertainment things that I watched, because I don't really watch a whole lot of entertainment. I watch some sports, and then, you know, I do other things, but I don't watch a lot of TV or movies or things like that. But the last two things popped into my mind immediately. The one of them is Mandalorian, right? And I watched The Mandalorian, which the quality of that show just took a nosedive. But whatever, I like Star Wars. You think of Mandalorian and the friendships in Mandalorian. Were any of them sexual? Any of them? No, none of them were sexual. But what there was a whole lot of in Mandalorian is egalitarian assumptions. You know, Bo-Katan Kryze. Look, I think that the Kryze family is got a cool story, you know, all that kind of stuff. I used to watch the Clone Wars, the animated series and stuff like that. So I knew about Bo-Katan before and all that. But it was just so awkward how much in your face they needed to emphasize that Bo-Katan was just as good, if not better, than Din Djarin. The Mandalorian's awesome, but Bo-Katan's even better. It's all about presenting that they're equals. The inner ring of the Mandalorians, you know, they have to have equal females and male. The whole point, it's not about sexual, it's about equality. It's about everyone has the same skill set. Everyone is just as strong. Everyone's just as capable as fighting. Everyone's just as violent. Everyone's just as smart and all this kind of stuff. That's the point of Mandalorian. That's not the only kind of example I could use. There's tons of pop culture movie examples where there isn't this hyper-sexualization of all these emotional, friendships and things like that. But what there is a lot of is the egalitarian assumptions. She's completely wrong. She doesn't know what time it is. And I don't know if it's that she doesn't know what time it is. I think that she's lying about what time it is. You know what I mean? The second thing that came to my mind was a kids movie. Mario Brothers. I took my kids to the theater to watch Mario Brothers. And if there's any movie that would have some romance in it, you would think it'd be Mario Brothers. And for a lot of kids, that's like the first, experience they had with sort of a love story. Mario's there, and he's there to save the princess because he loves the princess. You go through the Goombas and the Koopas and all this stuff. You save the princess, right? But that even in a movie like that, where you'd expect it to be there, it's not there. The point of Mario Brothers isn't that Mario and Princess are in love. The point of Mario Brothers is that Princess is just as capable, if not more capable, than Mario. Now, I'm not criticizing Mario Brothers that much because they really could have gone whole hog on that message of, feminism and egalitarianism, and they did not, which I was very happy to see. But there's definitely some of it in there. Princess is very athletic, she's very powerful, all this stuff. She ends up saving Mario, things like that. So it's like instead of Mario saving the princess is saving Mario. We get it. But like, there's two movies, just the last two that I've seen don't have this like hypersexualization where everyone's trying to sleep with each other. She's lying about that. That's not correct. Why is she lying about that? Because for some freaking weird reason, it is uber important to these feminists that we have intersex friendships. And I gotta be honest with you, that's freaking weird. I don't have any female friends. My wife is my friend, and that's it. Simple as that. Do I talk to other females? Yeah, if their husband's there. I happen to like my friends' wives. They're fun. They're fine. They're all that. But we don't hang out. You know what I mean? She's not calling me up to get my opinion on something. That's not how it is. I don't have female friends. You know what I mean? If I happen to see someone, like I'll give you another example. The other day we were in the Dominican Republic and I was there for a wedding, and someone that I had talked to quite a bit on the phone for work was there, and she said, "Hey, Adam," and introduced myself. And the first thing I did is, "Let me go get my wife. Let me go get my wife." And I grabbed my wife and I brought her to introduce them to each other. I don't. What is this need for these feminists to have? This is a terrible idea, and people are noticing this. It's like, this is an absolutely horrendous idea. And I got to be honest with you, coming from Matt Chandler's church, where there was just some kind of a weird incident with Matt and some woman, which we don't really know the whole details. We don't need to know, but it was enough for him to take a step down for a little while. This is horrible. This is a stupid idea. This is not what the world needs right now. The world does not need an example of how women and men should be friends. That they're not married, but they should definitely be emotionally deep, emotional friends. Like, that is so weird that you think that's what time it is. No, that's not what time it is. The time is that we need to be pushing back against these egalitarian assumptions. These egalitarian assumptions that Jen Wilkin is promoting here are destroying our culture. Destroying our culture. It's as simple as that. It's just like, this is so wrong, it's so upside down, that I just have to assume that a smart person like Jen Wilkin, because I think she's smart, is lying about this. It's not that she's confused. It's not that she doesn't understand. It's not that she's ignorant. It's that she is lying to push something. I'm not really sure what that thing is. I mean, obviously it's egalitarian, it's feminism, but it's weird. It's more than that. People are noticing that. It's like, why is feminism associated with this weird thing where men and women that are married have to have friends of the opposite sex to truly be showing the gospel? Like, what is that about? Very strange. Anyway, we are going to continue this. We've got this guy. He is very, very happy with the feminism he heard, and he's going to tell us something. This is going to be good. I think this is going to be really good. We're going to find out.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen, for outlining that for us. I want to take a look at
seriously, though. I really want... Does he not look like a Ninja Turtle? If he painted his skin green... And he put on a little, a little thing. He would look like a Ninja Turtle. Maybe I would too. I don't know. Maybe I would look like a Ninja Turtle. I don't think so, though. I don't think so. I think there's something about the way he's shaped that makes him look like a Ninja Turtle. That's not an insult. The Ninja Turtles were jacked.
It's from a different direction. What if there is a church leader out there listening who does not feel like he has women in his church who have the gift and calling to teach? Why does this conversation matter to him?
Yeah, this is actually a funny comment that I'll get, a well-meaning and actually a kind comment that people will say to me. Pastors will say, well, but I don't have a Jen Wilkin at my church. And I always want to say, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know? I know how hard it was for me to sort of get on the radar of leadership in the church. And often that's because since women are most commonly only teaching in what I affectionately call the pink ghetto. They're in women's ministry settings. I'm going to say this gently, but often women's ministry suffers from a benign neglect from pastoral staff. It is beneath the regard sometimes of those who are in charge of adult discipleship, and it is not seen as part of the scope and sequence of adult discipleship. It's its own little thing. And so one of the reasons that pastors often don't know if a woman has a teaching gift or not is because they never set foot in the pink ghetto. They just let that happen. And as long as the women are happy, then that's great. And the issue with that, and I could tell you, I know so many female leaders who have had this happen, is that if you're never in the pink ghetto, then the second you start to hear that something's happening there that you're not crazy about, then you drop the hammer. Right. And you're like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to shut that down, or we're going to remove that leader because she's been operating out there on her own. She has a siloed ministry. And I promise you, the woman who is in charge of that ministry was dying to have access to those in leadership and to say, please, if you don't believe what I'm doing is valid, let's make it something valid that is in alignment with the greater goals and vision of the church. So I call it a benign neglect. Unfortunately, intent and impact are not the same thing. And so if you don't have any sense that there are women in your church who can teach, I would ask first, have you gone to the places where women are teaching in your church? Because I think you will find that they're there and they're doing humble and quiet work, and they could probably use some help and advocacy.
So it's just so interesting. It's like, once you've walked away from what the scripture says, it naturally creates all kinds of problems. Like, so she's like talking about solving a problem that shouldn't even exist in the first place. It's like, it's like, every time I, walk through, the bad part of town, now I got to, wonder, how to avoid, the drug dealers that are shooting, each other and stuff like that. It's like, well, have you tried maybe walking around that part of town, maybe not going right through it? I mean, then you wouldn't even have to worry about dodging the bullets. How to do it, how to dodge the bullets. It puts you out of your way maybe a little bit, but have you tried that? It's like, this shouldn't. This is the thing. Like she's trying to make it seem like, well, we've already moved on from the, I don't allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. We've moved beyond that. We haven't addressed it. We just said, yeah, that's what we do at our church. We allow a woman to teach and exercise authority over a man. And so we've moved past that, and now we're moving to, I don't know. It's just, I think here's what really needs to be challenged, like the legitimacy of like women's ministries at all. I think that needs to be examined and challenged and thought through. It's not the argument that really needs to happen, like the debates or the podcasts that really need to happen, is something on that level, like on a very basic level, not this stuff. This stuff is like, you've already caved, you've already collapsed. Like, we need to think through that. And I'm not making any, determinations or decisions, on this podcast. It's not my place, right? It's not my area of expertise. But that's what needs to be examined, at a very fundamental, basic level. Not whether or not, like, we can, we could figure out a way around Paul's clearly saying, I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Yeah, let's make some different categories of authority, like elder authority, and then, delegated authority and things like that. Like that's when you've already caved, that's the kind of thing you discuss. We need to turn back the clock and turn back the discussions and really have a basic fundamental conversation, especially in the SBC. You guys need to do this. This needs to be done because you guys have a big problem on your hands, as I said in my last episode. This kind of stuff will destroy the denomination. It's as simple as that. It will destroy the denomination if you let it. And so, anyway, let's continue.
You said that this came out for you out of more of a deeply pastoral moment than a deeply theological moment, and you weren't minimizing the theological side in any way. I've heard you say to me that really this whole conversation is more of a pastoral exercise than it is a theological exercise. So pulling on that original thread, applying that.
I mean, do you see this? Like, the whole thing is framed to give her a pastoral platform. Jen speaks of herself as an elder, even though she says, I am not an elder, but everything she's doing and talking about is as if she was an elder. And they have accepted that. They are speaking to her as if she's an elder. He says, hey, you said this was a deeply pastoral thing at your church, that you were intimately involved in creating the decisions and things like that. And so because it's a pastoral, let me hear you explain that a little bit. I mean, who would you ask to explain pastoral matters in a normal conversation? It's not a trick question. You would ask a pastor. And they brought her on the Gospel Coalition as a fill-in for a pastor to talk about pastoral issues. This is a big problem. I think a lot of people wouldn't have an issue with this in the SBC, and they really need to. They really need to. This is a big problem you guys have on your hands.
How can you flesh that out? Can you explain what you mean by this being as much?
And by the way, like I'm saying the SBC, not to say that the Presbyterians don't have their own issues here. They most certainly do. They most certainly do. But I'm saying the SBC is because it's the largest denomination that's tackling this issue right now. Plus, Jen and Village Church, they're in the SBC. So that's why I'm saying that. I'm not trying to pick on you Baptists. I love you guys. Simple as that. Simple as that.
More of a pastoral exercise as it is a theological one.
Yeah, I think anything that a church is serious about that is hard to talk about and potentially controversial is usually born out of a crisis moment. Otherwise, why would you do the work? And, we know this in our own lives as well. The things that we care the most about, we probably had a painful learning around. And in the case of women flourishing in the church, I think that when you are a male in leadership and you look around and you see that the men are, all using their gifts and serving. And
in Christian nationalism, I'm going to say this. If I'm ever a magistrate in a Christian nationalist society, I will ban the use of the word flourishing. It'll just be, the word will be removed from the dictionary, and if you use it, you will get a light beating the first time, and then a heavy beating the second time. Flourishing, the word flourishing will be banned under Christian nationalism. It's as simple as that.
And you can see like, oh, well, the men in our church are thriving. It's just the women. I don't know if the women are or not. But if the women in your church are not thriving, then the men in your church are not thriving, because we're meant to do the work together. The Great Commission goes forward by the contributions of both men and women, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers in the church. And I think that the reason that this is not at the top of the list for some pastors.
Did you notice that she's like, well, if they're not using their gifts, then they're not thriving. They're not flourishing. What is the assumption there? The assumption there is that the gifts are the same. It's the same gifts. It's the teaching gifts. It's the preaching gifts. It's the prophesying. It's everything. Everything's the same. So if the women aren't teaching and in leadership gifts and things like that, if they're not doing that, if they're not in leadership, if they're not being consulted, if their permission isn't being granted, if they're not teaching, if they're not doing this and that, everything the men are doing, then they're not thriving. You see what I'm saying? And the writers of Mandalorian said the same thing. If Bo-Katan isn't kicking the Mandalorian's butt every now and then, she's not thriving. And look, it's not the writers of Mandalorian. This was happening in Star Wars back in the Clone Wars time as well. When I was watching as a kid, this programming's been going on for a while. The egalitarian assumptions, I've said this many times. I grew up in those. I breathe those like the air I breathe. You know what I mean? That's how I grew up with those kinds of assumptions. So it's like they're not thriving. Well, how do you know? Well, because they're not in leadership. They're not teaching. Yeah, but what if? And I'm just spitballing here. This doesn't really come from anything. I mean. What if the gifts of women were different? What if God, in his infinite wisdom, when he created Adam, he created him a certain way. And then when he created Eve to be a helper fit for him, he created Eve in a certain way. And those weren't exactly the same. What if Adam was intended to take dominion and to conquer and to be tough and to be a provider? And what if Eve was there to nurture the children and to bear the children and to keep the house? And what if they were thriving, but they weren't doing the same things? They were both flourishing, but they weren't doing the same things. What if? What if? Power. What if? Garbage power.
Just because their hearts have not broken over it.
There's another one, Stinky and Dirty. There's some platonic friends. Stinky and Dirty. No romance there. They're just friends. They're friends. They hang out with each other. One's stinky, one's dirty.
The things that I have tried to do is to break a few hearts along the way around this, because I believe that it is truly heartbreaking when a local church functions in a way that we would never want a physical nuclear family to function. So if I told you that there was a family in your church that had an authoritarian father who dictates a lot of rules, and a mother who is either never around or never says a word, and then parents and then children who just toe the line, you would say, man, that's a really unhealthy family. We're worried about them. We want to see what's going on. Is that woman okay? But too often in theologically conservative churches, we function as single parent authoritarian families with a father and children and an absentee mother. And the reason that this is terrible, there are a number of reasons this is terrible, but one is because when women don't see church mothers in their local church, they don't stop looking for mothers. So like I think about that P.D. Eastman book, Are You My Mother? It was a children's book that I loved when I was growing up, and the little bird is going around looking for his mother the whole time. And that's the way that many women in the church are. And so when they don't see these women in their church, they don't defer to their pastor. They have a father. They can see him. They're looking for a mother. And so they look to women outside of the church. And in my experience, often the senior pastor, if I were to give him a list of the top 10 most influential women on Instagram in the Christian circles, they would not recognize those names. They would not know whether those women were teaching sound doctrine or not. And they only know about them when something big blows up. And then they're all about it, but it's like, well, this woman's already had 10 years of mothering the women in your church because there was a vacuum in your family structure.
Could be. So what she's done here is she's created, well, what if there's like this evil church, right? Dictator father, and a submissive mother, which is interesting that she uses that as that's an evil church. That's a church that's not functioning. It's a submissive mother. Interesting. And then kids who toe the line. So that's her. It's an evil church. What if there was an evil church? That would be a bad thing. So therefore, like we gotta create a non-evil church, right? We got to create a non-evil church, because what's going to happen in those evil churches is that they're going to look for someone else to be their mother. Interestingly enough, the women in her story become children. Very interesting, because earlier she was saying that was not how it really was, but here she's saying it is. Okay, that's fine. So it could be that they're seeking their mother, which I'm using her words here. I don't know if I agree with any of this, but this is her story, not mine. It could be that they're seeking their mother because their father's a big meanie and he's evil and all of that kind of thing. And their mother is absentee because she's submissive, she's absentee. This is her story. So it could be that they're out there on Instagram seeking a mother because they've got an evil father, right? That's the story she's setting up here, an evil family. Or it could be that they're out there seeking a mother because they don't like what their mother actually has to say, because their mother says, I agree with Paul that a woman should not teach or exercise authority over a man. They don't like that because they've been programmed since birth just like all of us, I'm 40 years old, so if you're roughly my age or a little bit younger, you've been programmed since birth to think that that is oppressive. You've been programmed since birth to think that you need to be as equally, competent in every way, equal provider, equal money, all that stuff, equal pay for equal work, all that. You need to have a career. You've been programmed since birth that that's the way, and you hear at church that, oh, but you see, the problem is with my story, that would require the possibility for women to possibly, maybe, potentially sin, have sinful ideals. It's just the same old song and dance of every woke thing that's ever happened. It's just you assume the worst always. You assume the worst, and of course the minority, the oppressed, can't even possibly sin, and that's how it goes. I think that her little story. Sure, there are probably authoritarian churches out there. Fine. Is that the issue of the day right now? No, that is not the issue of the day right now. The issue of the day is egalitarianism needs to be defeated, needs to be challenged, needs to be confronted. That idol needs to be chopped to the ground because it is destroying us. It is destroying our country. It is destroying our churches. It is destroying everything. Very interesting how her narrative worked there. It's just amazing. We'll see what this guy has to say, and then I think we'll be done for the day.
Wow. I've got multiple follow-ups, but I better behave myself. Could you lend some insight?
Can you imagine this guy not behaving himself? Yeah, I'm gonna behave myself. But yeah, I got multiple follow-ups, multiplicity of follow-ups. But I'm not going to talk about that because it's better to cut once and measure 10 times. But is that how it goes? If you want to rock the boat, you got to stay afloat.
Jen, into just circling back again to this document. I have not had the privilege of reading through it, but I am curious. Could you tell us more what the process looked like? Right. So you'd mentioned a lot of times we don't identify who these influential Christian mothers are. There's a crisis, all right, but you all have worked through a document and have discussed some things that could potentially help us avert that same type of behavior. What did that look like?
All right, I guess we're going to see the pastoral process that she was a part of to write her paper. This should be interesting, but it'll have to wait for now. I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.